Good to have your company here on Business Weekend. Well, Lindsay Partridge has been the Chief Executive of Australia's biggest brickmaker, Brickworks, for 25 years. But today, with its joint ownership of the giant warehouse and distribution precinct at Oakdale in Western Sydney, it's changed the way that it makes money. But bricks still are at the heart of Brickworks. And Lindsay Partridge, set to retire in July this year, says government is simply making it harder and harder to make anything in this country anymore. And that is a sad indictment.
Well, when I started in 1985, I was a factory manager, and we had a factory that was the worst performing factory you'd ever seen. It was the dirtiest place you'd ever seen. And my job was to turn it around, and I had worked previously, and I am a ceramic engineer, and we did that pretty quick smart and turned it into a really magnificent plant. And from there, I never looked back. But we were only, 5 plants, in New South Wales and Queensland, and that was it. There was only a few hundred people turning over a little bit over $100 million a year.
So today, compare it with what it was then.
Yeah, that's right. Well, 2 continents, 30 odd plants, more than 2,000 employees, turning over more than $1 billion a year, market cap well in excess of $4 billion.
So is it harder to be a manufacturer of something very basic like bricks? Is it harder to be a manufacturer today than it was 25 years ago? Yeah,
much harder. And some of the examples I'll give you, some of the things that have happened. We were in sawmilling. We were the only hardwood sawmiller. We could never get log licenses long enough to ever invest. So we had all these old, dangerous plants. And then we got out, and then a couple of weeks later, the government stopped logging. Well, not only did that wipe out the sawmilling industry, it also wiped out local furniture production in Australia, and also wiped out things like pallet production. There was a company in Melbourne making 1 million pallets that all went. And then when the Gillard government was in, they brought in cabotage. A lot of people might not understand what cabotage is, but what it means, if you're a foreign ship and you pick up at any Australian port, you have to pay the Australian rates of pay, which means it doesn't work, so the ships do not pick up. So prior to cabotage, we could ship bricks from Sydney to Perth and Perth to Sydney, and it was quite effective. But today we can't do it, to the point where we think we could put a plant offshore and ship them directly offshore far more effectively than what the situation we've got today.
But then there are other things, like you and I have talked about it before, the price of wages in Australia, the price of energy in Australia. These are all keys to making something as basic as a brick. But you've got an active comparison by having expanded into the United States and in fact run that operation at one stage.
Yes. And that's the crisis. So here, we've got fuel excise. Over there's no fuel excise. Here we've got taxes on wages, payroll tax. Over there's no payroll tax. Here we've got, which I think is the most insidious tax on manufacturing, land tax. And that we don't have land tax over there. Matter of fact, if you talk to most city or states, they'll try and give you a discount to get you in, maybe for 10 years, just to get you in. But you don't have those taxes. Now, they're taxes embedded in the cost of production. That's the worst sort of tax for any manufacturer. The governments love them because nobody can see the tax. But when the factory closes because it can't pay its land tax, even if it's not making any money, there's no payroll tax, that's the end of the business. So it's very difficult in Australia.
Okay, so does that mean that you think over a period of time, state governments in particular, but federal governments also, have conspired to drive manufacturing out of Australia?
I don't know if they've conspired. I think they've been a bit naive in what the outcome was. They've been a bit too, tricky by half, and they've led us to this situation. But unless it comes back, as far as we're concerned, it's going to be hard for my future CEO that takes over to convince the board to invest more money in Australia when you've got these sorts of problems, on top of the incredible difficulty you have getting approvals to do anything.
Okay, so approvals to do anything, that simply slows things down. Compare Australia with your approvals compared with your US operations right now.
Yes, well, I took the board over there and we're in Iowa, and the governor came and had dinner with the board and said, how can we help you? Now, you don't get that in Australia, I can tell you that. We're lucky during COVID we got a quick approval because they wanted shovel-ready projects and we got a plant through. But we were trying to put a new kiln into one of our plants where we've been making bricks for 100 years in Perth. We tried for 10 years, could never get approval to put a new kiln in. One of the reasons why we left that state was that we couldn't put new plant and equipment in. So I don't know how you go forward if you can't get the approval to do this.
So in other words, this has got to be a coordinated industry policy to ensure that more manufacturers that make basic products, such as bricks, do not disappear forever.
Well, it needs to be a review of the bureaucracy, because it's not only manufacturers, it's also, we've spoken about this in housing. You can't get the approval for the land, to cut up the land, to put the houses on. You're trying to put a cottage on a block of land, approved for a cottage, and you can't get approval. It takes 6 to 12 months. It's ridiculous. And then we used to make all of our own building products. Well, more and more of them are coming in from overseas every year as these factories wind down and disappear. I mean, I think the cement industry is one that's going to go. No one's going to invest in the cement industry, not while you've got that cabotage. It makes it impossible.
So you've changed this business though. When you started, a brickmaker, it was a pretty basic low-paid job. Today, that is fundamentally different because you've had to try and compete by making these plants as technically savvy as you possibly could.
Yeah, absolutely. And our new plant is absolutely amazing. The productivity, the amount of robots, the automation, the data transfer around the system, the scale of the kiln, the efficiency of the kiln is just, really there's nothing else like it in the world. It's fabulous. But that's as far as we can go. There's costs, best part of $210 million. For a plant to make 130 million bricks. That's a lot of money you've got to come up with. You've got to make bricks for a long time to get that money back.
But what about the skills of your workers and the payment of your workers over that time?
Oh yes, we've been training heavily for 20 years and upskilled some of the highest qualified in every trade you can think of. They earn wages $150,000, $200,000 per annum. They're very highly paid. They're very skilled. We love them all to death. We don't lose any of them. They're really important to us.
Take me to energy, because energy is one of the keys. You need gas to be able to cure these bricks. Is energy policy in your favour to make bricks here in Australia right now?
Well, it's a concern. We're very lucky that Santos gave us a long-term contract. So we're happy there's Australian companies there to support us. But without that, it really makes, putting the sort of investment I just spoke about, how can you make that sort of investment if you can't get gas? I mean, this is what happened to us in the timber milling. We couldn't get a 20-year log licence, so we could never invest because we could never get the return. So, I mean, that's important. Unless industry sees long-term stable pricing for gas, then they're not going to invest. And I come back to the example in the United States. We're paying $3 a gigajoule in the United States, and we're currently paying somewhere in the order of about $12 in Australia per gigajoule for gas.
I can't go without asking you one thing. You've been chief executive for 25 years, one of the longest standing chief executives in Australia. Is it easier today with all of the shareholder activists, with hedge funds out there agitating on a constant basis? Is it easy to be a chief executive today or back when you started 25 years ago?
Look, good question. I guess I'm a bit more experienced today and I'm used to a lot of that. And, we've had the odd takeover now and then that's tried to disrupt things. So that's always kept us on our toes. I think that's changed, It was a smaller business and luckily I was able to grow with the business. I was able to stay on top of it. And I had a very supportive board. You can't do anything if you haven't got the support of your directors. And that was a really important thing as well. But the complications today, I mean, some of the solutions are outside your control, and I don't know how to tell people how to fix them, like the gas issue or the cabotage issue, or you can talk to politicians, but nothing changes. It just sits there. It doesn't go anywhere, and in the meantime, you stop investing.